I'm Scarlett, a 37-year-old, childless, working housewife. Today is our 5th wedding anniversary, and also my husband Everett's birthday, who is the same age as me. Everett is a handsome salesman at a famous company and seems to be quite successful, but he often works late and entertains clients, so we don't see each other much. Our wedding was a simple weekday ceremony with family and a few friends, as we both had weekend jobs and struggled to find a common schedule. Everett strongly wanted it this way. So, for our anniversary and his birthday, I asked him to come home early. I took a half day off from work. I bought his favorite Wagyu steak, wine, and cake at a department store and set a stylish table. I waited for Everett to come home. However, despite my insistence on coming home early, he didn't return. I received a single email saying he had urgent work and would stay at the office. Disappointed, but understanding it was work, I cleaned up the dinner and went to bed, feeling a little doubtful since he had said he wasn't that busy. The next morning, I went to work as usual, and my messages to his phone went unread. No response to my calls either. Worried, I called his office and was shocked to learn he had resigned the day before and apparently found a job in a neighboring prefecture. I hadn't heard a word about this. I rushed home and saw his shoes at the entrance. I burst into his room to find him packing his belongings in a suitcase. "What's going on?" In my surprise, I opened my eyes wide and asked him that, and he said, "What, you already found out?" while clicking his tongue and handing over the divorce papers. "What's going on?" With cold eyes, he repeated my question and said, "Let's get a divorce." "Why? What for?" "I'm fed up with you not fulfilling your role as a wife. You prioritize work, don't cook, do laundry once a week, and the room is dusty. I don't need a wife like that." "Wait a minute. For the past 2 years, I made dinner and waited, but you always said you had eaten and didn't eat it. That's why I stopped cooking." "Still, it's a wife's duty to cook and wait. Besides, your cooking is terrible, so I started eating out." At the beginning of our marriage, he used to say my cooking was great. I shuddered at his cold voice and argued that we had agreed when we got married that I would do the laundry and cleaning on my days off, Wednesdays and Thursdays. But he just rolled his eyes and said, "So, I should put up with a dirty room from Friday to Tuesday? That's a joke." "What happened to you all of a sudden?" "I never thought you wouldn't quit your job even after 5 years of marriage. When I got a job offer, I thought it was a good opportunity." "A good opportunity to divorce?" Everett never complained about my work or housekeeping, and there was no sign of him wanting a divorce. "Well, you never noticed how dissatisfied I was. I don't need a wife like that. I rented an apartment near my new job, so I won't be coming back to this room." With that, he pushed me aside, standing in front of the door, and left the house with his suitcase. I stood there dumbfounded, unable to comprehend what had happened. A week later, I attended a high school reunion. I wasn't in the mood to go, but I had already paid the membership fee, and I hadn't been able to contact Everett since then. I was feeling frustrated every day, so I thought it might be a good change of pace. When I went, there were divorced and single mothers among my classmates, and everyone was living strong lives. Until then, I had only hoped for an improvement in my relationship with Everett. But when I thought about it, if we reconciled, I would have to follow him to his new job location. If that were the case, it would be impossible to stay at my current job considering the daily commute, even though it's just in the neighboring prefecture. On the other hand, after working for 17 years since graduating from junior college and receiving a decent salary, it would be almost impossible to earn the same income in the new location. Everett had completely rejected me, and I began to think maybe I should give up. What made it definitive was a phone call from Everett urging me to move. We had been living in a rented apartment, and Everett was a tenant. The lease renewal period was approaching, and it seemed the real estate agent had contacted Everett. "I told them we'd move out in a month, so get rid of everything by then." "I'm still living here. And you didn't consult me at all, I complained, to which he replied, I'm the one renting it. I don't need to consult you, in a combative tone. I realized that it was really hopeless and said, Fine, I'll clean up my stuff this weekend or next weekend. Get rid of not just your stuff, but also everything left in my room and the furniture. What? I was ticked off when I heard that. What are you talking about? This room was originally rented by you when you were single, and most of the furniture has been used since then. Most of the other furniture and appliances were bought with your credit card. I'll dispose of the furniture and appliances I mainly used, but naturally, you're responsible for disposing of the rest and covering the disposal costs. When I replied, he hung up. What a stingy man, taking only his precious belongings and leaving all the cleanup to me. This made me determined to divorce him. Over the weekend, I sorted out the closet, reminiscing about the happy times we'd had since we got married. There were many things belonging to both me and Everett. Among them, I found his high school graduation album. Come to think of it, all the friends Everett introduced me to were from after college. I absent-mindedly flipped through his graduation album. That's when I noticed something unexpected. I submitted the divorce papers and reported it to Everett by email. A week later, in the evening, I received a reply from Everett with a picture, which was a marriage registration form for him and a woman. I was astonished and stared at it when he called me. Did you see it? What does this mean? It's exactly what it looks like. I just had a wedding ceremony and remarried that woman. You're kidding. She's super beautiful, rich, and has a great personality. She asked me to marry her as soon as we divorced. This is proof. Isn't it amazing? So you were cheating on me while we were married? I'm popular, unlike you, who only has your job going for you. Oh, by the way, her father built us a house on their property, and I transferred to her hometown with his help. It's a mid-sized company, but I'm an executive. Everett must have really wanted to brag about remarrying his rich affair partner, but as he nonchalantly answered, a strong anger rose within me. He said there was a problem with me and divorced me, but it was actually to remarry his affair partner. He said they had been dating for over 2 years. They met at a pub with his coworkers, and she was one of 4 women sitting at the next table. Apparently, when Everett spilled his drink on his clothes, she wiped it off, and that's how they started talking. Man, she's the same age as you and me, but she's super beautiful and looks like she's 10 years younger. She quickly wiped my clothes with a pretty handkerchief. According to Everett, when he took her to a restaurant to thank her, he learned she was a landowner's daughter. She had an arranged marriage at her parents' suggestion, but was troubled by her husband's infidelity. After saying, I need to fix my bad parts, she's totally different from you, I was instantly attracted to her, he said, and then aggressively pursued her. She started dating Everett without divorcing her husband. Isn't it normal to question the woman who dates 2 men while trying to be devoted to her husband? But Everett, blinded by love, didn't notice. A woman who doesn't support her man is no good. You prioritize work and don't care about your husband. You're not right for me. Huh? You can't stand on your own, so you want me to support you? I couldn't help but yell at him, and Everett seemed annoyed as well, saying, I'm so glad I'm finally free from a woman like you. Stella is the best after all. Stella? Is that her name? Yeah, it's written with the characters for double and flower, like the double cherry blossoms. She was born when the double cherry blossoms were in full bloom. Her parents have a great naming sense. They are true celebrities. As I listened to Everett's voice, enchanted with her unique name, I remembered something. Did you really marry such a wonderful woman? You're not lying? Pretending to say this, Everett's pride was hurt. She's the best wife with a great family background and personality. Look at her elegant beauty. As I expected, he sent me a picture of the 2 of them at their wedding. No doubt, it's her. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. What's so funny? This is proof that we really got married. Sure, it's real. I can't help but laugh, unable to say anything more. Hey, stop laughing. We really got married, and there's a baby in her belly. What? No way. I can't stop laughing. I get it. Losing me must have made you go crazy. Everett interprets my laughter in a way that benefits him and says dreamily, in 3 months, we'll have a baby girl. She'll definitely be as beautiful as Stella. Well, even if she looks like you instead, she'll still be beautiful. Everett has a sweet, idol-like handsome face. For some reason, he gets a little flustered and says, no, she doesn't need to look like me. Hearing that, I burst out laughing again. Everett says, go crazy on your own, goodbye, and hangs up the phone. Eventually, he'll find out why I was laughing. I can't wait for that day. Afterward, we had some disputes over alimony and property division, but I managed to get millions of dollars from Everett through a lawyer. Everett agreed to pay alimony for his share, not wanting to cause her emotional distress during her pregnancy. 2 years passed without any contact, and then I finally received a heartbreaking email. Please, Scarlett, I beg you, please listen to me. Reluctantly, I answered the phone call that came right after the email. As expected, it was about the child born between him and Stella. Well, kids tend to look like their parents, right? Of course! Who else would they look like? Yeah. Apparently, the baby girl doesn't look like the beautiful Stella at all. I tried saying, she's only 2 years old, right? She'll change a lot as she grows. But he couldn't be convinced, thinking it's strange that there's no resemblance at all. Well, I guess that makes sense. When I asked, holding back laughter, doesn't baby look like you? He suddenly panicked and said loudly, no, she doesn't, but it's okay. It's okay that she doesn't look like me. He secretly did a DNA test to check for Stella's infidelity, but the results confirmed that both Everett and Stella were undoubtedly the child's parents. So there's no doubt that she's your child. Everett wouldn't let the conversation end there. Hey, when I told you 2 years ago that Stella was pregnant, you laughed a lot. Do you know something? Wow, he remembered that. Well, yeah. Actually, Stella and I went to the same high school and were in the same grade. We were never in the same class during those 3 years, so I didn't know much about her, but I remember her being the daughter of a landlord and having a haughty, bad personality. At a class reunion about 2 years ago, the topic of Stella and her plastic surgery came up. Stella, with her single eyelids, small eyes, button nose, and slight overbite, was self-conscious about her looks and apparently underwent several procedures at a famous cosmetic surgery clinic in New York after high school. She didn't attend the reunion, so I couldn't see her face, but a friend later sent me before and after pictures of her. American cosmetic surgery is amazing. When I told Everett about this, he didn't believe me at first, but then realized that he'd never seen any childhood or graduation album photos of her. Was I deceived? Damn it! Stella acted all meek while we were dating, but it turns out she cheated on me multiple times and got divorced. She's been sued for alimony by several of her ex-husband's wives. I'm going to confront her. Maybe you shouldn't. Huh? Why not? Well, the child doesn't look like you either, right? Usually, girls are said to resemble their fathers. When I said that, Everett was at a loss for words. She can't look like you. You've had plastic surgery too. How did you? When I moved out of the apartment we lived in 2 years ago, I found your high school graduation album. You looked like a completely different person, so I was shocked. After seeing that album, I understood why he never introduced me to his college friends, insisted on having a modest wedding, and only invited a few colleagues from work. Everett probably had plastic surgery while he was in college and was afraid of being exposed by his friends at the time. I don't think there's anything wrong with plastic surgery, but you have to consider that your child might look like your original face. What should I do? What do you mean, what should you do? Just be a normal father. The results showed that the child is definitely yours. With that, I hung up the phone and blocked his number and email address. He's such a narrow-minded man, just because the child's face isn't what he wanted. A year later, a friend with a child the same age as Everett's showed me a picture of her child entering kindergarten, and the child was adorable. The child simply didn't resemble the current Stella or Everett. But according to my friend who became friends with Stella, Stella also expected her child to look like Everett after his surgery. My friend has to listen to her complain almost daily, saying I shouldn't have given birth to such a child. Seriously, they're the worst couple ever. And it seems Everett cheated again, so my friend even got divorce advice from Stella. Everett is such an idiot. If he ends up divorcing Stella, he'll have to pay alimony and child support. Plus, since Stella is a rich lady, there's no telling how much money she could get if she hires a skilled lawyer. Furthermore, according to my friend who became friends with Stella, even the local kids know about her plastic surgery, and her daughter is being excluded at kindergarten, being told, "Your mom is actually ugly." It's a relief that Stella's parents seem to love their granddaughter, but it's really sad for the child. Well, it's none of my business anyway. As for me, I managed to rent an apartment in a convenient location for commuting. Now that the distance is shorter, I can do cleaning and laundry after I get home, and I can spend my days off entirely on my own interests. I've deepened my friendship with a divorced classmate, whom I met again at the reunion, and I'm enjoying a leisurely and fun life.
What on earth is going on? Mom passed away from an illness, didn't she? The diagnosis was clear. Yes, she did. There's no doubt Mom was sick. Then why are the police here? My name is Catherine. I'm a 36-year-old housewife primarily focused on homemaking and childcare. I also work a part-time job 3 days a week. My husband Albert is a school teacher. He's strict with our children's discipline, but he's a wonderful dad who cherishes our family. We have 2 kids, a 5-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. They're at ages that require a lot of attention, so every day is hectic. But I have a strong ally in this journey of parenting. My mother-in-law, she lives nearby and is always there for us. She actively helps with the kids, which is a huge relief. I rarely visit my parents since they live far away, so I rely heavily on my mother-in-law. She always welcomes me with a warm smile, and I adore her for that. However, a change came into our harmonious relationship. My father-in-law's retirement at 65, he retired from his job. He had always been dedicated to his work, and now he seemed lost without it, staying at home all the time. To be honest, I didn't know him well. Unlike my mother-in-law, I rarely saw him, and when I did, he was always quiet, mostly reading the newspaper. But after his retirement, I was taken aback by how controlling he became, always keeping an eye on my mother-in-law. It might sound harsh to say he was watching her, but that's how it appeared to me. He would criticize the way she washed dishes or folded laundry. I couldn't help but think, if you have so many opinions, why don't you do it yourself? He was always hovering around her, constantly giving unsolicited advice. At first, she would argue back, but over time, she just seemed to give up and stay silent. She even stopped her morning walks because he would insist on joining. He would watch her every move, even when she was gardening. I could see her spirit fading away. I tried inviting her out for shopping or lunch to cheer her up, but he would always tag along. It wasn't fun anymore. I missed the carefree chats I used to have with her. Now, our conversations were either interrupted by him or cut short because he would want to leave early. Gradually, I found myself avoiding visits to their home. I discussed this with Albert multiple times. He would occasionally check on them, but he couldn't get his dad to stop this overbearing behavior. Albert often said, "I'm thinking of getting them divorced. It's too hard on Mom." But Albert's 2 sisters strongly opposed the idea. They had moved away and weren't aware of the current situation. We spent our days worrying about what's going on. One day, after a long time, I visited them. "Is everything okay, Mom? You look pale." I noticed she looked unwell and was sweating. "My back has been hurting since morning." "We should go to the hospital. Where's your health insurance card?"
"It's not necessary. I think it's getting better. She will just rest a bit."
"But she doesn't look well and also seems to be in a lot of pain."
"I said she's fine. Maybe she just hurt herself somehow. I'll take care of her, Catherine. You should go home." "But I said leave."
Despite being yelled at by my father-in-law, I stood my ground. "Catherine, it's okay. I'll just lie down and rest. Don't worry. I noticed my mother-in-law forcing a smile, so I decided to step back for a moment. I planned to call Albert, and once he returned, take her to the hospital even if it meant forcing her. By the time I realized this decision was a grave mistake, it was too late. I still regret that moment. After leaving their house, I called and explained the situation. He said he would leave work early. I also reached out to my sister-in-law telling her that something was off with Mom, but Dad was refusing the hospital visit. I asked her to persuade him. About an hour later, when Albert returned, we rushed to their house. Pushing past my father-in-law, we found my mother-in-law unconscious in her bedroom. Realizing it was too risky to drive her, we called an ambulance. Still, my father-in-law was shouting,
"You're overreacting. This is a nuisance."
Soon, the ambulance arrived and they took her. Albert and I followed in our car. My father-in-law didn't come. After a while, at the hospital, my sister-in-law arrived. "Is Mom okay?" "Dad wouldn't tell me anything. Catherine, I'm so sorry." "Why is everyone making such a big deal?" Their reactions were so different that I was shocked. Seeing my mother-in-law unconscious and yet seeing how calm Charmaine was made me distrustful. Not long ago, we were informed that she had passed away. The doctor said there must have been various symptoms leading up to this. When asked why we didn't bring her to the hospital sooner, I couldn't answer. I regretted not visiting them more often and not noticing the changes in her. I wished I had forced her to the hospital when I saw her earlier. Tears wouldn't stop. Both Albert and Joanna comforted me, saying it wasn't my fault, but making them comfort me, especially after losing their mom, made me cry even more. After that, even though we were grieving, we were swamped with tasks, preparing for the wake and funeral, contacting relatives. Maybe these tasks should have been for her natural child, but I wanted to be involved as much as possible because I loved her. With the whirlwind of tasks and deep sorrow, my memories of that time are blurry. I remember clearly only after the funeral. Albert and I, along with Charmaine's and Joanna's families, gathered at their house. Albert and I were cleaning up her room, as usual, or maybe even more so now. My father-in-law did nothing. He continued living as if nothing had happened. Sometimes he would ask for help with chores, but Albert always declined. From the living room, we could hear the children playing. Everyone was either cleaning or relaxing. As I sorted through her clothes, slowly coming back to reality, I found myself keeping more items than discarding. When I opened a drawer with small items like handkerchiefs, I noticed a false bottom. Out of curiosity, I checked and found a diary. It seemed well written. Feeling guilty, I skimmed through it and found something shocking. I quickly showed Albert, and I could see his face turning from shock to anger.
"What is this?"
"Albert, I'm sorry. Based on what I believe, I need to report this right now." Ignoring Albert's plea to wait, I immediately called the police. If what was written in my mother-in-law's diary was true, she was abandoned by him. About 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang, while the unsuspecting family was resting. When I opened the door, several police officers entered and I handed one of them the diary. After skimming through it, the officer nodded and proceeded further into the house.
"What's going on?"
"Hey, stop it!" Both my father-in-law and Charmaine were surrounded by the officers. Joanna and her husband looked on in shock while Albert and I moved the children to another room.
"What happened?" "We would like to discuss the circumstances of your wife's passing. You're Charmaine, correct?"
"What's this about? Mom died of an illness and we had the diagnosis." "Well, it's true. Mom was definitely sick." "Why are the police here then?" "She was sick, but if she had gone to the hospital, she wouldn't have lost her life." Joanna and her husband couldn't hide their shock at these words. Mother-in-law left a diary. She wrote about how her body hurt, but she couldn't even afford to go to the hospital. On other days, she mentioned how Charmaine wished she would just disappear. Mother-in-law had documented the daily verbal abuse from father-in-law in her diary. Not only from father-in-law, but she also wrote about how Charmaine would call her almost daily begging for money, and when she refused, Charmaine would lash out with harsh words. It's also written here that you guys, knowing mother-in-law was a wealthy heiress, prevented her from going to the hospital to get her inheritance. Mother-in-law had every right to live. She didn't need to die. I couldn't hold back my tears as I spoke. Father-in-law looked pale while Charmaine seemed indifferent. Well, what could I do? My husband earns a meager salary, and I need money for socializing with my mom friends for my child's kindergarten. Just the other day, they were flaunting their new designer bags. If I don't have the same, they will exclude me. Dad used to give me an allowance, but since he retired, he said he's broke. When I talked to Mom, she told me to stay away from such friends. If you're not on my side, it's no problem if you're gone. Charmaine's selfish reasoning made both Albert and Joanna clench their fists in anger. Albert, trying to stay calm, gently held my hand, and I felt the tension leave his grip. Looking over, I saw Joanna being comforted by her husband. See, you guys have someone to protect you. My husband, with his low salary, doesn't stand up for me. I'm just unlucky. Charmaine's husband quickly looked away, clearly not wanting to defend her.
Sis, I also earn a low salary. That's why Catherine works part-time to help out. She does more than her fair share, and I want to make her happier. What are you doing for your family?
Charmaine bit her lip in frustration.
Dad, you've always spoiled her. Why did you abandon Mom? She was cheating on me. You might not even be my son. She got what she deserved. When did she cheat? You've been following her around since you retired. Well, she did it behind my back. Just last Sunday, she met her lover. Were you not with Mom last Sunday? You're always with her. How long were you apart? I followed her everywhere, even when she said she was going shopping.
Father-in-law seemed more panicked the more he thought about it.
We were never apart. I was always watching her.
Then,
who told you about Mom's affair? It was Charmaine.
All eyes turned to Charmaine.
You lied?
Well, it's funny. I told Dad that Mom was cheating, and he quit his job to stalk her.
I can't believe. What have I done?
Father-in-law's face turned pale and he collapsed.
I've always doubted her. I've said terrible things. She told me she felt sick last week and wanted to go to the hospital, but I didn't give her money. I believe Charmaine when she said Mom was faking it to meet her boyfriend.
With a weak voice, father-in-law broke down in tears.
I promised to make her as happy as our son when we got married. What have I done?
A police officer pulled a sobbing father-in-law to his feet. No matter how much you regret or cry, your wife won't come back. We'll continue this at the station. The police took away the still crying father-in-law and the sulking Charmaine. Later, when Albert and I visited the police station for questioning, we learned that Charmaine was in deep financial trouble. As she had said herself, she became stubborn, trying to assert dominance among her close mom friends. Originally a high-maintenance woman, she married a man from an average family. Despite her husband and in-laws' objections, she insisted on sending her child to a kindergarten frequented by the wealthy. Once she joined the flashiest group there, she began to indulge in luxury lunches and brands to fit in, eventually accumulating debt. Unable to confess to her husband, she turned to her father as usual, but he had quit his job and couldn't lend her money. Her mother never took her seriously from the start. Turns out, her mother-in-law came from significant wealth. While sorting out her belongings, they found bank statements under mother-in-law's name with amounts they had never seen before. She had hoped to rely on her wealthy mother, but after being coldly turned down, she wished she could just inherit the money. She began feeding lies to her father-in-law, causing him to stress out mother-in-law. Mother-in-law's health deteriorated faster than expected, which pleased her. She kept telling father-in-law it was just a minor illness and not to take her to the hospital. Because of her selfishness, mother-in-law tragically lost her life. In mother-in-law's diary, there were messages written to Charmaine. It read, "Don't be swayed by others, understand what truly matters, and I hope you realize what's essential and live a happy life." Things she couldn't say to her face. Showing her, this didn't change Charmaine's heart. She ended up in police custody for a while. Father-in-law consumed by grief is likely to be given probation, but he will still have a criminal record. Even though they can't meet anymore, I hope he reflects on his actions. In the end, Charmaine and her husband decide to divorce, with the father getting custody of the child. She never thought it would come to this. Only when her child was taken away did Charmaine break down in tears. She probably realized the gravity of her actions only after losing what mattered most. She's said to cry every day, wanting to see her child. Albert and Joanna were devastated as their family fell apart, especially with both the father and Charmaine having criminal records. Was the diary written by mother-in-law to someday reveal the truth to someone? Or was she planning to serve father-in-law divorce papers and claim compensation? Now, no one will ever know the real story. But I feel relieved that the truth about what happened to mother-in-law is out in the open. I dearly miss mother-in-law, but the time I spent with her was genuine. So, I want to keep moving forward. If my son ever gets married and brings home a daughter-in-law, I hope to be as kind-hearted as my mother-in-law was to me.